Shabbat Shalom. It is nice to have you all here. It is just a pleasure to be here. Cantor Davis, it's nice to be here with you as well. Shabbat Shalom. When God was creating the earth, God created angels first. Then God asks the angels, should I create human beings? And the angels say, well, what are humans going to do? And God tells a little bit about what humans are going to be like. And the angels say, it doesn't sound like a good idea. They don't sound like the best things to create. And God reaches out God's finger and destroys the angels. God creates a new set of angels, says, hey, angels, how are you? I've been thinking about creating human beings. And the angels say, what are they going to be like? God says, well, this is what they're going to do, and this and that and the other thing. And the angels say, doesn't seem like a good idea, God. God reaches out God's finger and destroys the angels. God creates a third group of angels and says, I'm thinking of creating human beings. What do you think I should do? And they say, God, sounds awesome. Do whatever you want. For angels, to not be perfect is to cease to exist, because that's why they were created, which is different than us. We are created, God knowing that we would fail, God knowing that we would sin, and yet still we're here. So as we go into this Shabbat, which is known as Shabbat Tshuva, the Shabbat of Tshuva, we think of our ability to be better, our ability to redo something about our lives, recreate ourselves. That is fundamentally what it means to be human, that option is always available to us. So, as we go into it, we spend this Shabbos thinking about all of the ways in which we want to be better in the year to come, and all of the ways in which we can make that happen. Now, to begin with, though, we're going to call on some people who have absolutely nothing that they need to change about themselves, right? You're good? Benjamin's like, what's happening? Benjamin and Dahlia, mazel tov to you. You are here to celebrate your B'nai Mitzvah, right? Woo, yeah, woo is right. It is so good to have you guys. It's going to be great, I promise. It's going to be so fun. We're so excited to celebrate with you guys tonight. We are going to invite you and your family to join us up front. We're in our Sidur Lev Shalem for people who are here with us. They're near you. If you are joining us from afar, welcome. You can find an electronic version of this on our website. If you're able, I would like to invite you to please rise. We invite our B'nai Mitzvah and Judy and Jeff as well. Please, everyone, the whole family, to help us light Shabbat candles. We're on page 4.
Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu le'adlik ner shel Shabbat. We turn in our prayer books to page 10, Yedid Nefesh. Yainai, nai, 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 nai. Yainai, nai, nai, nai. Yainai, nai, 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 nai. Yainai, nai, 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 nai. Yedid Nefesh. Let's go and sing to Adonai, Lechu neranana, page 11. Lechu neranana Adonai, Naria letzur ishenu. Nekad mafanav b'todah. 40 שנה כות בדור, ואמרם טוי לבבהם, והם לא ידעו דרכי, אשר נשבעתי באבי, אם יבואון אל מנוחתי. Sing to Adonai a new song, page 13. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, עצרו מיום ליום ישועתו. I know you know this. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, עצרו מיום ליום ישועתו. ספרו בגויים כבודו, וכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, עצרו מיום ליום ישועתו. כי כל אלוהי העמים אלילים, אדוני שמיים עשה, הוד והדר לפניו, עוז ותפארת במקדשו. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, עצרו מיום ליום ישועתו. ינאי נאי נאי ינאי ינאי נאי ינאי ינאי נאי ינאי נאי ינאי. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, עצרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני, שירו לאדוני. ישמחו השמיים ותגל הארץ, ירעם הים ומלואו, יעלו שדי וכל אשר בו, אז ירננו כל עצי יער, לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים באמונתו. We turn in our Sidurim to page 20, Romimu. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu, Romimu Adonai Eloheinu, ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho, ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. rise if you are able. We turn to page 21 for Mizmor LeDavid.
You may be seated. Shabbat Shalom. So tomorrow morning, we're going to read about Moshe in his final days with the Israelites before they go into the land, and he does not. And we're told that Moshe writes a shirah, a song, sometimes translated as a poem. He writes this shirah, which will stand as a testament for him, but we're told that in the future, it will be as a witness which will confront the Israelites. This poem that he writes. Now, the rabbis debate, is the poem Ha'azinu, the parsha that's about to come up, that's a big poem seemingly written by Moses? Is it all of the book of Deuteronomy? Is it the entire Torah? Whatever it is, what does it mean that this text serves as a witness to confront something or someone? Now, I spoke over Rosh Hashanah about a text that I use often to sort of confront myself, to make me feel, am I in the right space? Am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right track? If you want to check out the sermon, I'm sure it's online. Download PAS Connect. I think it was okay, Rabbi? And you thought it was fine? All right, okay. So the text for me is a person, Adam Nikar b'shosha devarim, a person is known by three things. Bechoso, bekiso, ubekaaso. They're known by their cups, their pocket, and their anger. Check out the sermon for greater treatment of that text. But as we turn to Lecha Dodi, which is famous as being a shirah, a poem that our people have been saying on Friday nights for generations, I want us to think about, on this Shabbat Tshuva, what a poem, a work of literature, whatever it is, a saying, a phrase, that we want to use this year as something that could be a testament to us, or something that might confront us when we're not doing what we're supposed to do. So it might be a verse from Torah. It might be a verse from liturgy. It might be a verse from Ted Lasso. That's a pretty good place to get it from. Whatever it is, think of a phrase. You could call it a mantra. What is a phrase that will keep you going on the path that you want to go on this year? What is a phrase that will, like Moshe's poem, be a testimony and something that will confront you? And if you're don't have one right now, then as we go through Lecha Dodi on page 23, take a look at some of the poetic language there and see if something strikes you as something you might be able to use this year. We turn to Lecha Dodi on page 23.
Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. 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 שמור וזכור ודיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם לשוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי. אל יניש בין פורצי, ונשמחה ונגילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה. תוך אמוני יום סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. פני שבת נקבלה, פני שבת
All right, now if you thought of something, maybe tell the person next to you, wish them a Shabbat Shalom, and tell them what text you thought of, or text somebody a Shabbat Shalom or a hello. All right. There's plenty of time to keep thinking, guys. You have all year. Have a seat if you're able. We turn to the Psalm for Shabbat on page 28.
צדיק אתה מאור יפרח, כארז בלבנון יזכה. שתולים בבית אדוני,
we turn to the blessing of the children. If you have a child nearby, even if they're becoming adults in the eyes of the Jewish people right now, you can still give them blessings. Even if they just started their junior year of high school, you can still give them blessings. Even if you're sending blessings out to colleges across the world, you can still give blessings. We say over all of the children in our community, Yisimcha Elohim ki Ephraim uchi Menashe. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. Yisimech Elohim ki Sar, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah. May God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ye'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God grant you wonderful things and most of all peace. Amen.
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור we protect this chain from generation to generation. לדור ודור these lips will praise your name.
Aware as we are of all the blessings in our life, we are aware of the need to pray to God and ask for help with those blessings. If there's anyone here with someone in their hearts in need of healing, we invite you to rise wherever you are as we all sing together a Mishaberach.
El narefan Allah, El narefan Allah, Mi sheberach avoteinu. El narefan Allah, El narefan Allah, Mi sheberach imoteinu. Grant us refuah shlema. Grant us refuah shlema. May the source of healing renew our body, renew our spirit, and let us say Amen.
Refuah Shlema, speedy and total recovery. Amen. You may be seated. It is with sadness that we announce a few passings this week in our community. We announce the passing of Hans de Reuter, brother of Fruki, to Fruki and family. We're thinking of you. May Hans's memory be for a blessing. We also mourn the passing earlier this week of Ira Fertel, father of Stephanie Donath. To Stephanie, to Jamie and the family, we're thinking of you, and may his memory be for a blessing. And also the passing earlier this week and laid to rest earlier today of Ike Eisenhart, father of Jeff Eisenhart. Jeff, to you, to Susan, to Rachel, we're thinking of you. May his memory be for a blessing. Is there anyone who is observing a yahrzeit in the week to come? And if so, please rise so we can acknowledge their names.
My mother, Beatrice Lindauer. My grandfather, Eric Hoffman. My mother, Lisa. Mother of Messiah.
Esther Goldberg.
Thank you. And from our communal list, we're observing yahrzeits. You can remain standing. Of the following, always in our hearts, but especially this, the week of their yahrzeit: Sylvia Alden, Vicky Alpert, Florence Arenstein, Morton Baum, Manfred Berman, Lola B. Burson, Rudolph Cohen, Irene Cohn, Ray Cooper, Francis Evnitz, Jesse Fabian, Esther Finger, Miriam Fromberg, Charles Goldman, Esther Gallagher, Liba Gopstein, Ada Greenberg, Harvey Guberman, Jack Herstrick, Helene Honig, Louis Honig, Hannah Hope, Zoe Jacobson, Benjamin Jaffe, Joseph Karpf, Samuel Klaus, Dorothy Coven, Phyllis Kushner, Howard Lakes, Alexander Lapidus, Neil Levin, Miriam Levy, Gary Lichtenstein, Lawrence Lillian, Beatrice Lindauer, Selma London, Sybil Lusbader, Adele Mahler, Donald Malter, Irving Mann, Norma Markowitz, Audrey Neuwirth, Faye Nietzberg, Michael Oliski, David Pearl, Lillian Pearlstein, Kermit Perlmutter, Esther Rabin, Harry Rabinowitz, Mel Rich, Joseph Rosensaft, Bernice Sachs, Philip Schaeferman, Abraham Scharf, Manis Schwartz, Phyllis Shapiro, Harvey Siverdloff, Adolfo Starosta, Jonathan Stein, Richard Steifel, Rose Strum, Edward Wasserberger, Alana Werdiger, and Lawrence Werther. For all those who are in a period of mourning or anyone observing a yahrzeit, I invite you to please rise if you're able. Mourner's Kaddish, page 30. Yit Gadal Vit Kadash Shemei Rabbah Ba'alma Divra Chirutei V'yamlich Malchutei B'chayechon V'yomechon V'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala Uvizman Kari V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Ulmei Almaya Yiparach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yit Hadar V'yit Ale V'yit Halal Shemei D'Kudsha Brichu Le'ela Mikol Birchata V'shirata Tushbachata V'nechemata Da'amiran B'alma V'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. May their memories be for a blessing. If you're able, I invite everyone to please rise. We begin Mariv with Baruch Hu on page 39a.
Be seated.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב הרבים.
We're on page 40, leading into the Shema on page 41.
ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל, שמו ישראל, אדוני. בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם מאוד על ידיך, היו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
Continuing through the bottom of page 42 with our silent meditations. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר בני ישראל עשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Continuing through page 44, the song at the sea, as the children of Israel willingly accepted God's sovereignty, Moses and Miriam singing joyfully on the top of page 44.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם, משה מרים ובני ישראל לכנו שירה, בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך באלים. You sound great. מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, מי כמוך נהדר. נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, אוסף אלה. נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, אוסף אלה. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה. זה אלי, זה אלי, זה אלי, ענו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מי כמוך, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך באלים. מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Traditionally, at this moment in time, when we arrive at Hashkivenu, we ask God to spread over us a canopy of peace, and we remember that we all live in such a fragile sukkah, such a fragile state of existence, a state of being which, of course, on this, the eve of 9/11, at 20 years henceforth, has a special poignancy as we turn our attention to memory. And so it's with that thought in mind that I am going to stray from tradition. Rather than me introducing the prayer, we're going to call on a dear congregant, Adam Levin, to share some remarks from the Bima. Adam, you have the ill fortune of going through your entire life being known just as Kimmy's brother, and then Rafe's brother-in-law, and now you are Alana's husband, and then you are going to be the father, please God, of a player to be named. But tonight, on a more serious tone, you are Neil Evans' nephew, and so we call on you to share a few words.
And that's a title that I forever, feel respected and happy to have had and continue to have. Thank you, Rabbi Cosgrove and the Park Avenue Synagogue community for having me here this evening. My uncle, Neil Levin, was killed at the World Trade Center on September 11th. At the time, he was the head of the Port Authority for New York and New Jersey, and he worked in the towers. That morning, he was attending a breakfast at Windows on the World. I was actually in my second week of college when this tragedy occurred. My uncle never had children of his own, and my sister and I were like his kids. I looked up to him my entire life. I'm always conflicted over the pain of losing him in such a violent manner. I wouldn't give up the 18 years that I had with him to not experience this agony, but there are moments when I wish it didn't have this kind of eternal public existence. Losing someone so violently is a unique type of forever pain. Many people across our planet today live with this kind of loss, and within the history of the Jewish people, this is a constant, unfortunate theme. When 9/11 occurred, a friend told me something that I found extremely resonant. She said that I would always have a hole in my heart for my uncle, but that my life would provide me with future joys that would surround it and make it more tolerable to bear. And as an adult, I channel my uncle in two primary ways. He spent so much of his life making the world a better place for the Jewish people. He was a Wexner Fellow, a strong Zionist, and a fighter on behalf of Holocaust survivors to reclaim funds that they had deposited in Swiss bank accounts. Out of fear during World War II, the volunteering that I do today on behalf of UJA and JFNA is mainly inspired by him. And then the other is the type of uncle I am for my two nephews. My sister and my brother-in-law are here tonight. Becoming an uncle myself has given me an opportunity to connect with Neil like I never thought that I would be able to do again, honestly. I feel Neil in my heart when I hold and play with my young nephews, and people who know me well know that I like to call them my angel nephews, and that's why I call them that. People often ask me how I feel on September 11th or on a monumental anniversary like tomorrow. And sadly, when you lose someone as part of a global kind of violent tragedy, the pain, like I said before, is constant. The anniversaries are hard because the world and the media take note. But within me, the day does not feel any different from the day before or the day after. And I try to be quiet on September 11th and try to move through the day like a shadow, being still and knowing that I have the strength to mourn him and experience the sadness of his absence. Thank you again for having me here this evening. I think that Rabbi Cosgrove's ability to bring moments of thought and reflection towards September 11th, both this evening and then through his Devar Torah over Rosh Hashanah, can give light and perhaps relief to the suffering people like me experience every day over this kind of violent loss.
Adam, thank you, and we wish you and Kimmy and your whole family comfort and the blessing of memory this day and every day. We turn on page 45. We pray for peace and comfort, Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom, v'ha'amidenu malkeinu lechaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום, לשלום, והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, שמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
If you're able, I invite you to please rise. Veshamru, page 46.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. יתגדל ויתגדש שמי רבה, ואלמד דברי קידותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה בגלה ובזמן הקריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל לשמי קודשה בריחו. לילה לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעמה ויאמרו אמן.
Let's take a few moments for our silent meditations, beginning on page 47 through page 52. The Hebrew, the English, the words on the page, the words on our hearts, There are special insertions for this Shabbat Shuvah these days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to take note. Go at your own pace. You may be seated as you conclude.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim יתקרא ויקרא שמי רבה. בעלמא דברה קירותי והמניח מחותי בחייכון ובמכון ובחי לכל בית ישראל. בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמירי קודשה פריחו לעילא לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. תתקבל תורן ורון דכו ישראל קודם אבוני ושמיה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן amen.
It's a great pleasure to call on our B'nai Mitzvah, Benjamin and Dahlia Phillips, to come up. I invite you, if you're able, to please rise as we are led in Kiddush, blessing over wine. We are on page 55. Page 55.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kadsho ba'ahava uvratzon hinhilanu zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit ki hu yom tehila lemikra'ei kodesh zeher litziat mitzrayim kivanu v'harta votanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kadshecha ba'achava uvratzon hinchaltanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. Amen. How do you like that wine? Benjamin, Dahlia, do you guys know what the word verklempt means? Okay, it means when you're like gushing up with emotion. It's a Yiddish word. Why am I verklempt, other than the fact that it's your B'nai Mitzvah? Because this here right now is the very first time since March 6, 2020, that I have stood on the bima with B'nai Mitzvah. And so it is a very emotional, beautiful moment that we can all be very joyous for. So we can all say L'chaim. You guys can finish that wine if you want. I'm so excited, I'm not even going to check. Let's all remain standing. Aleinu l'shabeach. We are on. You guys can grab a seat now, so the cantor can come back up and lead us in Aleinu, page 56.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא זרענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. כי המלכות שלך היא ומעט תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד,
be seated. In just a moment, as we always do, we'll say Kaddish, but we will precede it by way of the memorial prayer. The memorial prayer said in memory of all those lives that were lost on 9/11. And we were speaking as a clergy team. There are different ways that this date, 20 years, is being memorialized in the New York community, in the national community, the world community. There's a reading of names that are happening at the memorial downtown. And how do we go around and acknowledge everyone in the community who lost a loved one? Do we acknowledge everyone? What is the proper way to do it? And as we were talking about this internally as a team, I received an email. And Doron, thank you very much for the email, because I arrived here in 2008. I wasn't here as the rabbi in 2001, but you shared with me the following reminiscence that I'd like to now share with the entire community. You shared that here in the neighborhood, around the corner from our synagogue on 85th Street, our community had suffered a grievous loss. Our local firehouse, Ladder Company 13, Engine Company 22, sent its men down to the towers when the call went out that Tuesday morning. It suffered one of the most devastating losses of any firehouse in the city. 9 firemen never came back. Their pictures have been on the outside of the firehouse since. In every 9/11 since, many in the community go there to pay tribute, to place flowers, and contribute towards their memorial fund. But Doron, you went on to explain to me that in the week that followed, at the Rosh Hashanah services on September 18th, Park Avenue Synagogue had invited the firehouse to send some of its men so they could be recognized. We were at this is Doron's words, we were at the most important moment of our service. We were standing 1,000 people with the ark opening, the cantor chanting Untitled Chapter, who will live and who will die. To my right, the door opened. Rabbi Stern emerged through the door. Behind him, was anyone here at that moment? You were there. Okay. Behind him, I could see, escorting some people, 4 firemen from the local firehouse up the aisle towards the bima. They were in full gear. The fire truck parked outside. As people began to be aware of what was happening, the prayer stopped, and the crowd burst into applause. The 4 firefighters went up on the bima. As everyone could see, the applause continued and continued and continued for many minutes unabated. All the emotions of that week burst out with many, many tears. I feel as if it happened yesterday. After many minutes, the applause died down. Rabbi Stern asked the firefighters if they wished to say anything, any words. He looked at the senior person, the fire lieutenant. There was total silence. The lieutenant looked around, more silence, and finally said, "No, we're overwhelmed." And so the people began to walk down the aisle. The applause erupted again with even more fervor. People reached out to hug and kiss the firemen, and everyone cried. From one corner of the room, I was sitting there, and the firemen were approaching. I could hear a few voices singing, "God Bless America." Soon, over 1,000 people were singing "God Bless America" as the firemen, now wearing yarmulkes, slowly made their way to the exit, engulfed by gratitude, affection, and embraces. And Untitled Chapter, never to be forgotten. We remember Thomas Casoria, Michael Alferis, Thomas Hetzel, Walter Hines, Vincent Kane, Dennis McHugh, Martin McWilliams, Thomas Sabella, Grigory Stajik, and all of the firefighters, first responders, all those whom we recall at this time, all our loved ones. If you would, I'd invite the community to please rise as a cantor chants an El Maleh, followed by a Kaddish, which we will all say together.
שוכן במרומים, המצר קדושת השם בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור ביצרור החיים את נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום. על משכבם ונאמר Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens, to the souls of all those we recall today. May their memories be for a blessing. May they rest in peace. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings, and may their souls be bound up in the bond of life. God is their portion. May they rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. Page 58, together, Kaddish. Yit kadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah ve'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kari ve'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam olmei omaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitdromam v'yitnaseh. Vit hadar, vit ale, vit alal, shemei de kudasha brichu. La'ela ula'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru amen. May God, who ordains harmony in the universe, grant peace to us, to Israel, to all of humanity, and let us all say, Amen. We may be seated. Cantor Davis, I want to thank you for leading our services so beautifully this evening, as well as to David Enlow and to the entire ensemble. Thank you so much. Rabbi Witkowski, thank you for your words of wisdom and your leadership of our community, to Ross and to Oscar and the entire team who make possible our services, both here in person but also virtually, to anyone and all those people watching from afar. We thank you. There are all sorts of new things going on with the virtual watching, something called PAS Connect. This is, who's downloaded it onto their phone? Okay, all of you who haven't, download it on your phone, because not only is it a neat way to watch the services, but it's always new material. You can listen to Rabbi Witkowski's old sermons, the cantors' music. It's a way to access 24/7. You can be part of the community and for all ages. On a couple announcements, Sunday, September 12th at 1 p.m., Dayenu, the Jewish organization advocating for climate legislation. We will be meeting at 1 p.m. at Grand Army Plaza. So if you'd like more information, speak to me or speak to Rabbi Witkowski about that. And then this Monday at September 13th at 11 o'clock, our Arts Engagement Committee has an event, so registration online to be part of that. Dahlia, Benjamin, Mazel Tov to you. It's like it's here, your B'nai Mitzvah weekend. You guys excited? Are you verklempt? All right, I am. All right, so Mazel Tov, and Judy and Jeffrey, Mazel Tov to you, to the whole family from near and from far on this very happy occasion. Services tomorrow at 9:45 in the morning, where you will be called up to the Torah, and we will celebrate a very happy occasion in the Phillips life. We look forward to it. What we are going to do now is we are going to sing Shalom Aleichem. We are so honored to have Jennifer Sr. here in our midst. We are going to go immediately after Shalom Aleichem to the dialogue here. So if we have a lot of people here, people at home can't see that, but if for some crazy reason you have dinner plans and you're walking out, then please do so quietly, because we're going to start immediately here. I think there'll be a slide, there'll be chairs here, and then we are going to have a dialogue with Jennifer, making sense of the senseless 20 years after 9/11. And it's also available on Livestream and PAS Connect. So with that, did I get all the announcements? Okay, so Cantor Davis will conclude with Shalom Aleichem. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bochem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzedchem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbat Shalom.
Frankel, a longtime and wonderful member of our community, to introduce our speaker this evening. Aaron?
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much, everyone at Park Avenue, for inviting me here tonight, and especially Rabbi Cosgrove. It's so nice to be back here in person inside this beautiful sanctuary. A community is really made up of the people, and it's lovely and comforting to see so many familiar faces after so long. It's also very meaningful that my parents, husband John, and daughters Ariel and Gemma are here in person. As the super rabbi he is, Rabbi Cosgrove called me about a month ago to check in specifically as it relates to marking 20 years since losing my first husband, Gregory Richards, during the attacks on 9/11. In his wonderfully compassionate and disarming manner, the rabbi asked me, "How are you doing?" This has always been an incredibly difficult question to answer, honestly. When I last stood here 5 years ago, I wrestled with that same question. I guess in some fashion, I've been asking myself that question for the last 20 years. But during this call with the rabbi, I told him about an amazing, brutal, poetic, and brilliant piece of writing in The Atlantic that illustrates the lingering trauma for all of us family members. In the 20 years since the events of that day, I haven't read or seen anything that captures grief the way writer Jennifer Senior did in her article titled, "What Bobby McLevain Left Behind." Tomorrow, every text I get from friends kindly reaching out saying, "Thinking of you," or asking, "How are you doing?" Instead of replying with a simple thank you, I might have the impulse to include her article. I never had the right response, but without living it directly, Jennifer managed to get it just right. More importantly, Jennifer illustrated the universality of grief and hope as you hear her explain her quote from the article, "Life loves on." I'm sure you will reflect on your own journeys. We have all lost. We have all have our stories. This is mine. COVID, along with a normal tragic hand that life can deal us, has brought us all so much loss, so much grieving. Here we are, still standing, maybe a bit broken, but life manages to love on. So now to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer Senior is a staff writer at The Atlantic and author of All Joy and No Fun, The Paradox of Modern Parenthood, which spent 8 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list and has been translated into 12 languages and was named one of Slate's top 10 books of 2014. Prior to joining The Atlantic, she spent 5 years at the New York Times, yay New York Times, first as one of the 3 daily book critics and then as a columnist for the opinion page. Before that, she spent 18 years as a staff writer for New York Magazine, writing profiles and cover stories about politics, social science, and mental health. Senior has won a variety of journalism prizes, including a GLAAD Award, 2 front-page awards from the Newswoman's Club of New York, and the Erickson Prize in Mental Health Media. Her work has been anthologized 4 times in the Best American Political Writing, and her profile of the psychologist Philip Brickman was selected for the Best American Science Writing of 2021. Senior has been a frequent guest on NPR and numerous television programs, and she has been a speaker at TED's annual conference and the Sydney Opera House. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and her son. Jennifer Senior.
I'm going to start crying before I talk. I can't even.
Jennifer,
Hi.
Shabbat Shalom, hi. Before we
Shabbat
hear from you,
Shalom.
Aaron, thank you so much for those beautiful words, for just being you, for being Gemma and Ariella and Asher's mommy. John, Shabbat Shalom to you, Murray and Ina. Go Blue. It's great to see you. Jennifer, welcome. Welcome to Park Avenue Synagogue. We are so honored to have you here and to be in dialogue with you. Your article in The Atlantic, as Aaron just said, was extraordinary. Aaron might have been the first to send it to me, but it was really this article that was sent around by everyone, and we all read it, and we were also moved by it. It reminded me just from a journalistic quality of it, of that famous Jimmy Breslin article with JFK, and he focused in on the gravedigger and made the small big, and your story, as Aaron said, brought out the universal dimensions of memory, of grief, and set the cultural conversation here 20 years since 9/11. We're deeply honored to have you. I'm just wondering if you could, maybe we could begin. There might be one or two people who haven't read the article. I don't know who they are, but on a certain level, it's a story of a diary that, sort of a purloined diary that belonged to Bobby McIlvaine, and was given in those moments after 9/11 and by his parents to his almost fiancée. And then the question of to whom this diary belongs. But like all great stories, it's really about much more than that. So perhaps you could begin just by sharing with us the genesis of this story and what it's about.
Yeah, and actually the genesis is a good way to do it. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's so nice to see you again. I don't know if, is this working? I'm audible, okay. Okay, oh, you're right. It's, okay, how's that? I'll talk like this. You are right. It is, to some degree, it's a custody dispute over a diary, right? That's not how the piece started. My editor called and said to me in my first week on the job, we're going to be doing something about September 11th, some kind of package. Do you have any stories to tell? And I said to him, I do. The story I have is actually about a marriage. It's about, I conceived of this first as a story about how two people survived losing their firstborn and grieved so differently. The McIlvaines, the father, Bob Sr., fell right into, he calls it 9/11 truth. I think what he believes are conspiracy theories. He has embraced them with a real ardor that surprises everyone. He wakes up every morning, and every day for him is September 12th. He wakes up determined to solve a mystery, to expose American wrongdoing. He thinks that the United States actually embroidered the Twin Towers with explosives and brought them down, that it was the government's doing. This is what he thinks. And Helen, his wife, whether she believes this or not, this is not her way of grieving. She doesn't wake up every single morning and think about this. It's the last thing she wants to think about. She spends her days, or she spent most of her days for the last 20 years trying very hard to stifle her grief. She didn't want to manage other people's awkwardness. She didn't want to manage other people's discomfort. And she didn't want to be pitied. So she would, she chose not to talk about it. And they stayed married for 20 years with one person talking about 9/11 all the time and somebody else not talking about it at all. So I was really interested in that. But it occurred to me that there was a larger story to do. And I just didn't really think about doing it because it would have involved me actually having to do something. And I'm trained not to be at the center of a story. I don't appear in stories. If I do, it's kind of like a Hitchcock cameo. I'm like, for 5 seconds, you see me getting on the bus, and that's it. Like, I'm barely in it. But I decided, okay, I'm going to do it, And it was this. When Bobby died, he was a big journaler, a furious journaler, and it's unusual for a teenage boy. He did it right through into his 20s. And when he died, his last journal was sitting on his desk. And his father was in such a fugue state of grief that as he was clearing out his room, just kind of trying to make order in there, my brother was in there because my brother was Bobby's roommate. his very serious girlfriend, who was about to be his fiance, was in there. And his fiance took one look at this journal and said, I'm all over this thing. Can I have it? And his father looked at her. She was looking at him beseechingly, I would imagine, and he said, sure, take it, And his wife was so unhappy about this. She fumed for years. She couldn't believe that her husband gave away the very last thing that her son ever wrote. This precious thing that might have given full visibility into his final thoughts, his final ideas, whatever he was becoming, whatever ideas he was struggling with. I mean, it was a way to spend time in his company again. It was one last time to enjoy him. And it was just poof, it was gone. And she tried to get it back. She kept asking the fiance for it back, and she couldn't get it. And I thought, it's been 20 years, I'm going to try and get it. And I got it. I'll spoil that because I started saying it in the beginning. But I mean, after 20 years, everyone was ready to kind of move some distance past it. We can talk about it, but anyway.
So it really became, and I think we're getting some static on your
I'm so
on your
sorry.
thing.
Oh, God, yeah.
But it's okay.
Oh, and now it's so much better should I move it over?
Yeah.
What about that?
Yeah, that should work, and if not,
I can try, okay. Actually, is this better? I mean, okay.
Let's give it a try. So the custody battle was not just about the diary. The custody battle was about memory.
Exactly.
It was really about who owned. Now, is this this theme of sort of who owns the grief, who was the rightful heir to, but who gets to tell his story? And I mean that seemed to be sort of the thread that was going through your article, and probably through today's 20 years since. And who owns the memory of the loved ones lost on 9/11?
And I keep thinking about the fact that if it hadn't been a physical object, if Bobby had lived now, he would have actually do, you know what? Why don't we switch? I think it's too awkward.
Great.
Yeah, let's do that. Should I just, oh, wait a minute, there's a doodad here, right? Turn it on.
I got you.
Here we go. And then, there you go. Now this is on. Okay. So if Bobby had been alive, if this had been 20 years later, there would have been an electronic record in the cloud, right? You would have known everything you'd thought because they would have had texts. They would have had emails. They would have had so many things, but they didn't. These physical objects became, so yes, I think you're right. I mean, some of it is just about, I think, the preciousness of a physical object and who gets that. And some of it is about, I think, who gets to grieve and who, what was interesting to me is these two women were talking right past each other about like really who was suffering most. And they were each suffering very differently. And they were not speaking in a way to one another that I think acknowledged the other's pain. And they were, the way a future spouse, she was grieving a future she was never going to have. And I think that in some ways, his mother was grieving a whole
Right, there was
past.
a sharp moment in exchange where the mother said something to the effect of, "You're young, you'll be okay," and obviously.
And her whole thought was, first of all, this was supposed to be my future, and who says I'm going to be okay? And whereas, and I actually took, for a very long time, I thought that the mother had the only kind of reasonable point of view, which is, how could you possibly rob a mother of every molecule of, belongings that her son had, that it seemed inconceivable to me that there could be another side to this, and it was totally humbling to see, indeed, not only could there be another side, but I could have been dead wrong, actually.
Right. I have like 8,000 questions about the article and not a lot of time.
I'm sorry, I sort of.
So let me just, you started the article in reference to your own relationship. Bobby had sort of a kid brother status to you, and the happenstance nature of the college dorm room, that had he have been in one room, he wouldn't have been your brother's good roommate and your brother's friend, and et cetera, et cetera. And I touch a little bit on this in my remarks on Rosh Hashanah about the happenstance nature and of life and of death. And it seemed like you were just sort of touching in your article on these sub-themes that we all can't help think about when we think about, people have been emailing all day today about the stories of those whose, if they were somewhere else, right, they would be alive, or if they, they went to their dentist that day, or they were on the golf course that day, and there's something deeply happenstance that people seem to be focusing on when it comes to 9/11.
Yeah, we all do these magic tricks where we try to undo things. I mean, in fact, I think I was telling you this, that Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky it was mainly Kahneman, did all this work. He's a behavioral psychologist who did all this work about the particular ways that our minds make efforts to undo things that have happened to us. And so if you think about my brother and Bobby, this is not something you would undo. This is just the way you said that life was shot through with contingency. If my brother had if he had been the first to arrive at his dorm, he never would have thrown his belongings on a bunk bed with Bobby McIlvaine, and they wouldn't have spent the first year of their college lives chattering with one another and getting to know each other really well. They might not have been living together on September 11th. Who knows, he might have been living with someone else who would have said, hey, blow off that conference tomorrow morning. I mean, we don't know, right? You can rewind the tape and replay this in a million different ways. Bobby started his job in July. What if he hadn't taken that job? It was just 2 months before, right? I mean, there are a million agonizing ways that you can think about. What if he hadn't? What if he hadn't? What if he, what I can't get, and just to show how magically parents kind of think about these things, to this day, Bob Sr., his father, thinks that if he had been with Bobby, he could have protected him. Like, that's a real active fantasy in his head, that if only I had been in New York by his side. It's very paternal. It betokens a strong parenting instinct, but it's also an undoing instinct. It's like, if I could have, tackled him, been on top of him, maybe I would have pulled him over to a coffee cart. They recovered his body, so he was quite far from the site. That's another reason that I think everybody kind of mentally tries to undo this. He wasn't in the building. They found his body. He was very close to being back to his office. So again, it seems like, what if he had taken a different route? What if he hadn't lingered over the breakfast tray? What if he had, he was friendly. I imagine him chatting up the guy he bought coffee from. I don't know. We all have undoing fantasies.
Yeah. So take me through there are different sort of trains of grief leaving the station. And you just touched on this a little bit, from the brother Jeff, who sort of has this insistence of not living just in the shadow of this trauma and the loss of his brother, to the father, Bob Sr., and conspiracy theories, right, to the mother. And you also spent some time ultimately with Jen, the almost fiancée, trying to make sense of her journey of grief to healing. So it seems like everyone is going through their own independent journey.
So they saw a therapist in the beginning, the family, that said to them, not with Jen. There was a lot of acrimony with Jen because she had taken the diary. But the three McIlvaines had seen a therapist who had given them a metaphor that was kind of an organizing metaphor for them, which was, imagine that you're at the top of a mountain and you each have a broken leg and you have to somehow get down. You can't help each other because you have a broken leg. So it's on you to figure out how you get down. And it's a really great metaphor. The problem with that metaphor, which I discovered, is that some people don't get down the mountain. And they don't want to get down the mountain. They actually want to inhabit their grief, and they need it. And there's something slightly oppressive about that metaphor in the sense that it sort of makes you think that if you don't get down the mountain, you're doing a bad job grieving. You're grieving incorrectly. The biggest revelation to me was that Bob Sr. has no interest really in getting down the mountain. He likes it up there. He's very comfortable up there. And he's 76 years old, and he doesn't see any reason to lead his life any differently. Like, this is for him what he does.
So the fact that Bob Sr. is investing all his energies 20 years later on conspiracy theories, yep. Right? I also read that in this era of conspiracy theories of Trump, of stolen elections and otherwise, but here, I mean, you could read it as a coping mechanism of protection. You can read it, he's not going down the mountain, it's denial. I mean, how do you, and there's literature, I mean, you can go on the web and you read this stuff about conspiracy theories. How do we make sense of this whole universe trying to explain 9/11 with lies?
Right. So there are a few things to say about that. First of all, if you ask his son, Jeff will look at you and say, that's cheapening what my dad is doing. You know, by saying it's his way of grieving, you're cheapening what he's done. He's read a lot. He really believes this. This isn't to him just some, you know. Then you ask him, is this a way? And then you'll go to his father and say, is this how you grieve? And he'll say, yeah, totally, it's how I grieve. So he doesn't think it's cheapening it, but he also believes it. I think, you know, we think of conspiracy theories as being, I mean, they are dangerous. You could argue that this was the first kind of internet-driven conspiracy theory, right? Like this sort of seeded all the others. And we tend to think of them as, you know, things that people who don't have any power embrace. I think it's true that Bob McIlvaine Sr. did not feel much power. I think he felt lied to. He expresses some sympathies with, you know, Trump voters in my piece. I think you could maybe draw a through line there. You know, but it can also, it's a way of subduing, I mean, any narrative, any story you can hang on to in order to sort of give shape to something senseless also makes sense, right? I mean, it could be all of these things. The weird psychoanalytic liberty that I would maybe weirdly take on this stage, but not on the page, but probably in conversation with Mr. McIlvaine, I would probably ask him if I, you know, the next time I see him, I probably would. Does it serve him a purpose to like embrace a theory that no one else is ever going to embrace? Because then he gets to keep mourning, like he gets to keep grieving. I mean, this is a way for him to spend time in his son's company every single day because no one will ever believe him. So it gives him the possibility to wake up and do it all over again. If someone believed him, he couldn't do this anymore. So, I mean, I should ask him.
And then his wife, Bobby's mother, you had a very powerful line about radical acceptance, yeah. Right? What it must take for, I don't know if indulging her husband's ideas is but fine. Is that too strong, or
no,
that's
she'd say.
I mean, that she's sort of has to navigate her own grief vis-a-vis her husband's behavior, which is totally different than hers.
Right, and I don't think indulging is too strong. And it's a really humbling lesson. I mean, when I'm sitting there having like a really trivial argument with my husband, like the first thing I think of is like, oh my God, you know, like compared to what other people are willing to tolerate and think about. I'm interested in two things with her. First of all, that she's lived around him for so long that this is sort of evidence that some beliefs can kind of become contagious, because at this point, she's willing to concede certain, like, if he wants to believe that the government, like, brought down the towers, she'll run with that. She'll run with it. She won't even argue. And at this point, she has heard so many times, she might, but the point is, she has no stake in this. She has no stake, and she certainly has no stake in his very, very, very specific kind of arcane theories for why the government brought down the World Trade Center, which I haven't even discussed, and they're really kind of particular. But her idea is, look, this is what I have in common with my husband. What I have in common with him is that we both lost Bobby, and he is the only man who can understand that grief. There are a million things to love about my husband that have nothing to do with how he grieves. When we courted, he was the only one who deigned to play sports with me. I was a really sporty woman, and no one else would even invite me to play tennis, and my husband did. My husband coached Bobby in Little League and, organized races around the house and put up ticker tape around the house for when we won. I mean, he was a very imaginative, loving dad. I know him as this incredibly lovely man. I mean, I adore the guy. So it's not hard to see why you could accept him and that this is part of the package now,
Okay. So tell us how, I don't want to give away well, we've sent out the article to the community, the whole world, it's been on the shelf, so
yeah.
It's a spoiler alert. But how did eventually the almost fiancée Jen and Bobby's mother reconcile the diary moment? Or how did Jen see it, I'll just spoil it, see it within her power to let the mother have the diary back?
Oh, right. I mean, she was going through her own kind of radical acceptance moment herself. Both Jen and the mom have something in common. They had a lot in common, which is very touching, right? I mean, Bobby fell in love in some ways with a woman who was, I think, a lot like his mother. One of the things they had in common is that rather than try and impose any kind of order or structure on this thing, they just accepted the idea that the universe is capricious and at times perverse and demented and rolls grenades in front of you and they explode, and that's it. And this was going to be what they were going to have to contend with. And so one day she woke up and thought, I should give this back to the McElvains. And it was about 10 years ago, and she never acted on it. So when I showed up at her door, she was so ready to do it. She was just so ready to do it. And I think also...
Did she understand why she resisted that at that moment?
Yeah, I think at the time she did want control. It was the only thing she had. And I think that also, I think everybody has sort of a Superman moment where they want to rewind the clock. The movie we're all old enough in here,
yes.
Right, where you're just spinning the globe backwards, right? And so for both her and for Helen, that was a way to sort of get back to September 10th, right? And Bob Sr. had it too. I mean, he kept thinking about, if I had been there, I could have protected Bobby, right? I mean, everybody, it's this very protective instinct, and this, again, it's an undoing instinct. And so I think they all had some kind of version of wanting to assert control in the beginning. She also, as I said, here's what's crazy. If she had been engaged, officially engaged with them, the McElvains had a ring in their house for her. They were,
Bobby had already asked.
Had already
for the hand.
asked her father permission to get married to her, and there was a ring sitting out in suburban Philadelphia that was all waiting for her, and so if they had so much as been engaged, or if they had been married, if they had had kids, there'd be no dispute. This would have been her diary. It would have been hers to keep, along with a house and a million other things. They had nothing shared, nothing, right? So you can sort of see it, and by the way, that was a huge thing for Helen to understand. The other thing, and this is really interesting, so Bobby was 26 when he died, right? So if your son dies when you're 26, the bulk of your memories are from him being under your roof. He is still to you in some ways a little boy. And here he was, still living with his college roommate, right? He was still young. So I think in his mother's mind, she was, in some ways, thinking that his things were her things. I don't think she had rounded some corner and thought of him yet as someone who was going to be starting his own family with another person and having living in another house wasn't with my brother. You know, I don't think that she had fully seen the whole picture. And I think when she saw the diary and saw that she wasn't in it, it wasn't about her, right? It wasn't about his nuclear family. It was about his prospective family. It was rolling forward.
And both, you know, there was also something about, in your piece, about the distortions of memory, right? I mean, that you know, just how long did she stay at the McIlvaine house after one person remembered a week, the other person remembered 6 months, 18 months? I don't actually remember what the actual truth is, but that idea that, it's kind of very rabbinic idea that, I don't know if it's rabbinic or human, but that we all remember things differently, right? And that's part of the grieving process as well.
And the fallibility of memory.
And no one's lying here. We just remember the same event differently.
The fallibility of memory is like this. I mean, I'm now so transfixed by this. So, right, if you ask Jeff McIlvaine, who's Bobby's younger brother, Jen lived with the McIlvaine family for 6 months after Bobby died. If you ask Helen, his mother, how long Jen lived with them, the answer is 1 week. I mean, how you can have such disparate memories. Jen thinks it was about 2 months. We'll never know. But that wasn't the only thing. I didn't even include all of them. I had a running file on my computer of all the things that people like remembered differently. I mean, okay. Bob Sr. didn't remember that his son's body was recovered at the periphery of the World Trade Center. The periphery, you know, like he could have been very close to Merrill Lynch at the time. If he had remembered that, he would have been spared so many nightmares. He was, for years, terrified that Bobby had died by jumping. But if he had remembered this, and it was my brother who actually had a note from Bob Sr. that said, you know, Lieutenant so-and-so has come to the house, or Detective so-and-so came to the house and told us that Bobby's body was recovered from the periphery. Based on where he was, we're not even sure he ever visited the building. Then they learned more and learned that he had, but he'd clearly left. But think about that. He forgot about something that could have given him great comfort. I mean, I'm amazed that he didn't latch on to that.
Right, what they latched onto, what they chose to forget, whether that was conscious or unconscious. I mean,
right. Well, it conflicted with his narrative about how he died, which was in an explosion in the lobby of the building that the government had done. So it served another end, right? But I mean, yeah, they were cross purposes, those memories.
So to ask the obvious question, how has the family reacted to the article?
They're very happy, but I mean, it's not because I'm some kind of genius. It's because they're not fancy people, and so they don't have like golf tournaments every year for him, or they don't do big stuff for him every year. They're also very modest and kind of introverted and self-effacing. And with every passing year, they just get really upset that his name isn't really out there in the world. So you do something like this, and then his name is out there in the world, right? So, I mean, if it had been like, you know, read by 1/10 the number of people, I think they would have been really happy.
Right, but that this was, I guess, A, accurate, B, a tribute, and all the more so at the 20th anniversary here and now, which I think is also, I mean, Aaron, we spoke a bit about this before of to go from the immediacy to where someone is at 10 years to 20 years to the journey of grief. I mean, no one ever, I feel that as a rabbi, no one gets over loss. It's just a matter of learning how to manage loss. This was a very different article at 10 years as it is now at 20 years.
It's funny you say that. Helen told me that she wouldn't have been able to forgive Jen if I had done it at the 10-year mark. Like, Jen might have surrendered the diary, and I don't think any of the charitable, beautiful things that Helen said about her own behavior at the time, any of her insights into what the diary actually said, I don't think would have happened. She had to go on a spiritual journey. She had to sort of, she woke up on the 10th anniversary of September 11th and thought, I'm still angry. I'm still fluorescently furious. I am so, so angry. She found herself a new therapist, got really spiritual, got a whole new, people's grief, it's like a live thing, it's not.
And so in reflection now as a journalist on this piece, this has really caught all of our emotion, all of our attention. You heard the effect it had on all of us who have read it. I just want to congratulate you, if I could say such a thing, for having written something that moved us all, that touched us all, that spoke to us all. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you for being part of this. And thank you, all those who are here, and thank you, all those who have been part of this via live stream. And you are always welcome here, Jennifer, at Park Avenue Synagogue. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.